Yeah, this week it's Lisbon, and quite an interesting sounding conference I've been invited to speak at. It's about social innovation. The conference took place at the Gulbenkian Foundation and was organised by Tese on the theme of social innovation as the next revolution. It was opened rather grandly by the President of the Republic himself, followed by a keynote on social innovation given by the director of the Young Foundation and former head of policy at Number 10, Jeff Mulgan.
Is there something missing, and that something is systems for taking the best ideas to scale. And we believe our social systems are far behind the systems we have in science and in business. And in a way, we are where the world of science was in the 19th century, where most invention was done by small organizations, lone scientists working in their gardens, in their attics, coming up with new ideas. In the 20th century, all of that changed. Governments invested very large sums of money in R&D and hardware. Businesses like DuPont or IBM or GE invested huge amounts in laboratories specializing in innovation and experiment. And a whole clutch of intermediary organizations built up to link the inventors and the users of their ideas. Almost none of that exists in the social field, and that's one of the reasons why there is this continuing deficit of social innovation.
When it comes to thinking outside the box, even the Gulbenkian artwork around us seemed to suggest the drama of social innovation finding ways to break out of old constraints. This happens all the time, after all, with new technology. Why, asked Jeff Mulgan, couldn't there be social Silicon Valleys?
One of the things we've done in some research on what makes localities innovative is mapping the networks of how people relate to each other. And one of our hunches is the most socially innovative places are the ones where the personal networks cut across the sectors: government, NGO, business, universities. And that's what creates the dynamism. Just as in Silicon Valley, the dynamism comes from the networks which cut across universities, venture capital, big companies, small companies, and so on. So it's not the elements, it's the connections which are all important. Those societies which are very siloed, very separated by their sectors, will not be very good at dynamic innovation.
For Charles Leadbeater, author of the recent book We Think, social innovation has a necessarily radical agenda.
All innovation involves challenge. So in Silicon Valley, the challenge comes from entrepreneurs. It comes from startups who come in and challenge incumbents. In social innovation, challenge has to come from social movements and politics. It has to come from people on the margins challenging the mainstream. And that is why social innovation is often so difficult, because the people on the margins often just get pushed back to the margins. It necessarily often involves challenging vested interests. So unless we organise social innovation so there's challenge to the status quo, challenge to vested interest, you don't get innovation. And finally, you need commitment. All innovation involves commitment. It's not something you can do just theoretically. How many people here learn how to swim with the help of a swimming consultant? So it does help if you've got someone teaching you, and it does help if you practice your strokes on the side of the pool, but eventually you have to get in the water. That's where you really learn how to swim. Now it helps if you get in the water at the shallow end, maybe with water wings on, and then progress slowly to the deep end. But you do have to get in the water. So this is one of the big problems with social innovation, which is the people who've got the most ideas and the greatest need often don't have the water. They can't find the resources to get into because the resources are locked up elsewhere.
So what did I feel about it all at the end of the day? What did I say on the stage in my presentation? Well, at One World we try to be doers rather than theoreticians about social innovation. We try things, some work, some spectacularly don't work. And it's easy, I think, to be seduced by a commercial idea of the social entrepreneur, that unless you're a millionaire by the age of 25, you're a failure. Unless your brand is known around the world, you're no kind of success. It's got to be different for social entrepreneurs, social innovators, because, above all, they can't protect their ideas in the way that commercial entrepreneurs do. We believe in open source. We don't patent. We don't copyright. And we don't work in secret because we have to collaborate with other organizations for a social enterprise to take off. You try and do it on your own, we all know it won't work. And anyway, we don't have that big money. We don't have the multi-millions to invest in an idea in a secret laboratory and then launch it on the world. So for all these reasons, I think we have to use different criteria. And I rather broke the rules of the commercial entrepreneur at the session by saying that I was going to reveal our
I showed a video
idea.
clip of One World's initiative on tackling climate change by finding new ways to avoid the carbon cost of flying. For the 15,000 people planning to attend the United Nations Climate Conference in December 2007, there seemed to be only one way to get there. Pity about the 100,000 tons of carbon. But for some climate activists, there was another way to fly. They travelled carbon-free in the virtual world of Second Life to One Climate Island and the virtual Bali conference. Behind each avatar arriving on One Climate Island is a real person sitting at their computer in a different part of the world. They've come from scores of countries, from Spain to South Africa, China to Chile, the US to Germany, waiting for the chance to make their voice heard with questions and comments to the participants of the UN Climate Conference.
Greetings from the UN Conference on Climate Change.
Okay, a final quick comment. This is called the next revolution. Revolutions are risky things. There's a lot of risk involved in being a social entrepreneur. And I would say to those foundations, those governments, those companies that want to support this movement, this revolution, go on, take the risk. Look for the people whose ideas seemed crazy at the time, but 5 years later worked out well, and go back to them 5 years later and say, okay, what's your new idea that seems crazy now? Take a risk and back it. Because without that kind of support, particularly from companies with the new emphasis on CSR, corporate social responsibility, which has been very fruitful for us, that relationship with companies like Cisco, BT, Vodafone, and so on, without that kind of risk from foundations, companies and governments and others, the revolution ain't going to happen.
Thank you, Peter. Jeff?
I would only reinforce Peter's point. We need more institutions with the willingness, the spirit to take risks, to try things out, ideally on a small scale. And let's be clear, many governments have experimented, but often on very large scales, and with disastrous consequences. So sometimes taking smaller risks is better than bigger risks, and we need more institutions willing to do that. But finally, I do think the spirit of the social innovation and social entrepreneurship movement has one very important element, and it's the element which has come up from several of the contributions today and yesterday. And this is the point: if you see a problem, it's very easy to tell someone else to solve it, to demonstrate on the streets telling someone else to solve it, to write an article telling someone else to solve it. But I think it's morally better to try and be part of the solution yourself, and not to be afraid to move quite quickly into action. And that's, I think, part of the spirit of social change, I hope, in the 21st century.